Hello, this week is Parsha Vayakel, and the first thing that comes up in it is Shabbat. And Shabbat is the greatest gift that God has bestowed upon us, and I'd like to take a look at it. Now, it's interesting that Shabbat is mentioned in the Torah twice. When we're given the Aseret Debrot, the Shamar Zachar, where it's a commandment, with the other 9 Debrot. And we also see it in Bereshit, and we see it in Parsha Ki Tisa, which I would like to quote right now, the pasuk that we know, we're all familiar with. We say in Kiddush, say on Shabbat, and that is V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat lasot et Shabbat l'dorotam brit olam b'ni u'bein b'nei Yisrael ot hili lam kishesha yemim asa Hashem et hashemayim et haaretz b'yom hashvi'i Shabbat v'yinafash. So this means that we should keep the Shabbat for generations, and it's a sign between us and God that God created the world in 6 days, and that on the 7th day it says Shabbat v'yinafash, which is generally translated as God rested and he was rejuvenated. I think this is a very poor translation, and in translating it that way, it's taking us down the road to misunderstanding. And I would like to explain the way I see it. So what does Shabbat v'yinafash mean? Well, Shabbat is a cessation of work. God stopped creating. He spent the 6 days making everything in the heavens and the earth. And when it says Shabbat, he ceased from all creative activity. And then v'yinafash. What does v'yinafash mean? V'yinafash, Nephesh, is that non-physical, that the spiritual life force. When we talk about a Nephesh, we say that there's a Nephesh inside the body. It's just that spiritual life force. So v'yinafash, he just was, because God's not a body. So all God did once he ceased from work is he allowed his Shekhinah to fill the heavens and the earth that he created on that 7th day without any interaction, just God filling that space. And we're told to emulate God and to keep the Shabbat. So now we know we're supposed to, God wants us during the week, he wants us to be creative, he wants us to do, and he wants us to be a partner with him in perfecting this world. And we spend 6 days doing things. But on the 7th day, when we emulate God, we're supposed to Shabbat. Now, this word Shabbat is fascinating because it comprises of a shin, a bet, and a taf. And those letters in and of themselves have meaning. A shin is she, that. The bet is be, in. And the taf is ta or ta, which is the ta masculine you, ta female you. So, she, in, that is you. So what God is telling us when he's telling us to keep the Shabbat is that if we keep the Shabbat properly, then we will find who we are inside, and we will get in touch with who we are. And that is what we're supposed to do, v'yinafash, to find that that breath of life that God put within us, that godliness that exists within each and every one of us, in that quiet time, to access that and to let that resonate outward. And if we all did that, I mean, that's the most peaceful moment that a man can find in that still, small, quiet voice within. And that is the greatest gift. That is the gift of Shabbat. It's very interesting to note that the other 2 times that I talked about in Bereshit, where it mentions Shabbat, and here in Ki Tisa, where it mentions Shabbat, not in Vayakel, that it's basically tells us to keep the Shabbat, and right after we're told about in Bereshit the downfall of Adam and Chava. So they went from the greatest heights to having that perfection to falling, and to the Jewish nation, who also went from the greatest heights of connecting with God on the mountain to then creating the Cheder Egel, because it was when Moshe was on the mountain, God tells Moshe about to keep the Shabbat, and then right after he says, go down, the people have created the ego. So what's the connection? Why does it mention Shabbat right before the downfall of mankind and right before the downfall of our nation? So I think what God is trying to tell us is that when we don't pay attention and understand what this gift is, and understand that we need to know who we are and be able to be fulfilled with who we are within, then we search externally for something. Just like Chava, she was able to be tricked by the snake because he told her, if you eat from the tree you will be like God. She wanted something more. She obviously thought that there was something more. She didn't feel complete with everything that God had given her, with the way that God had created Adam and Chava, with everything in the garden. But of course, it's that human nature. When we don't know who we are, we search out externally for something more, and that's what she did, and that was her downfall. And the same thing with the nation, is that they were supposed to connect on Har Sinai with God, but they rejected that. When God started to speak, they said, no, we can't handle this, Moshe, you do it. And they didn't, even though they had the ability to connect with God, God was speaking to them directly, and they could have accessed that, and they could have connected. They rejected that, and they instead, while waiting for Moshe, they built a golden calf to connect with something externally. So that's the danger. That's the danger of doing the opposite of what Shabbat is, of not understanding, of not being able to connect in that quiet time with God within. But that's the danger. But if we do it, then we can really have that peace. Each person can have that amazing peace. And that's why we're told that if all the Jewish people would keep Shabbat, Mashiach would come, because if everybody was able to understand and connect with who they truly were, they would feel complete, and there wouldn't be all this rift, and there would be peaceful times. And that's what we're really trying to get to. So I wish you all a blessing, and I hope that we can all connect and access that, and hopefully get out of the isolation, and just have a good life and be healthy. Shabbat Shalom.